Welcome back to Reading in Isolation. I'm Heather Rose. I'm one half of the children's author Angelica Banks. I write these books with my dear friend Danielle Wood. This is the first in the series, Finding Serendipity. Our books are also published around the world, and here is Finding Serendipity in its American edition. And sometimes I show you the pictures from those, as you know. Thank you for staying with us up to chapter 13. So let's get started because we left it at such an exciting point yesterday. Tuesday had just met Vivienne Small in real life for the very first time. And we'd also found out something extraordinary about Baxter, hadn't we? So let's go on. Chapter 13. "Yes," said the girl in surprise. "I'm Vivienne Small. But who are you?" "I'm Tuesday," Tuesday said, realising she had no idea how to proceed. "Tuesday McGillicuddy." And here she stopped. Although she knew almost everything there was to know about Vivienne Small, it occurred to her that Vivienne Small knew nothing whatsoever about her. Baxter whined. With some effort, he scrambled to his feet and shook himself. In a majestic action, as if he always did this, he stretched out two marvellous shaggy brown wings. Then he gave a yelp of pain. Vivienne jumped to her feet and examined his wings. "I think he's been cut while trying to get free from the boat." "Well, you and me both, Baxter," she said. Turning her back, Vivienne spread her own blue wings to show Tuesday a deep tear on the right side. "It happened yesterday," said Vivienne, "so no flying for me just now, and none for this boy either. Wings heal quite fast, though. I wouldn't be at all surprised if he can fly again in a day or two. You're very lucky, you know. There would be people who would kill to have him for their own." Tuesday's head was spinning. Was Baxter really a winged dog? She thought back to the day he had arrived at Brown Street, when he was just a tiny golden brown puppy. Serendipity had come down the stairs from her writing room with a little dog in her arms. Even Dennis had looked surprised, although he had quickly recovered his equilibrium and popped out to the supermarket to buy puppy food and all the other things a small, unexpected dog might need. All those years ago, Serendipity had said to Tuesday, "This is your very own dog, and because he's your very own dog, you and only you must name him." "Baxter," Tuesday had said, knowing instantly that this was his name. "Baxter," her mother had said. "Why Baxter?" "Because is what he will say if anyone ever tries to hurt me." And so Baxter, with a double R, he was. But had her mother brought him home from another world, from this world of Vivienne Small, where winged dogs grew to be bigger than horses, the fiercest of protectors? Tuesday could only sit and wonder at how such a thing had happened. Was Baxter truly one of the last winged dogs? Sitting between Vivienne and Tuesday, Baxter sneezed, and in a strange moment of synchronicity, so did both Tuesday and Vivienne. Not at once, not twice, but 3 times the two girls and the dog sneezed in perfect unison. And maybe it was the surprise of meeting one another, or the relief of Baxter being alive, or just the fact of having shared a bout of sneezing. But the two girls began laughing, and then they found they couldn't stop. And whenever they did pause for a moment, Baxter sneezed again, and they started over until their stomachs hurt from laughing. By the time the sneezing was finally over and the girls had wiped their eyes, they were friends. "I think we'd better get dry," Vivienne said. She pointed high up in the cliff behind them. "I have a cave up there." Together the two girls pulled Vivacious up the shore and tied her to a tree growing out of the cliff face. "How did you know about Vivacious?" Vivienne asked Tuesday. "That she was more than just a model boat, you mean? That she could be made bigger?" Tuesday asked. "Yes. How could you possibly have known about that?" "Oh, it was just luck," Tuesday said. "Baxter found her, and then I found the marble, and—" She looked up at Vivienne, who was clearly impressed, and then, not wanting to be untruthful, she added, I did once read about something like that in a book. Really? Vivienne said, looking very intrigued. Oh, said Tuesday, rushing to change the subject. You'd better have these back. She fetched her backpack, which was still tucked inside the cupboard on the boat, and fished out the two halves of the glass bottle from which Vivacious had so magically emerged. Vivienne took them from her gratefully. Then she said solemnly, So you saw the treehouse? Yes, said Tuesday. I'm so sorry. But what were you doing there? Looking for you, said Tuesday. You were, said Vivienne perplexedly as she continued furling the sails around the mast of Vivacious. Yes, I thought you might help me find my mother. You see, that's why I'm here. She's lost and... Your mother, said Vivienne. Yes, my mother's name is Serendipity Smith, said Tuesday, realising that this was the very first time in her life that she had said these words to anyone. Tuesday watched Vivienne's reaction carefully, and it seemed to Tuesday that even though Vivienne's lips were almost blue with cold, her cheeks flushed a little at the mention of Serendipity's name. Did the characters of books know their authors' names? Surely they did, but then maybe they didn't. She's about this tall, said Tuesday, indicating a little way above her own head, and she has short brown hair. Or maybe she's this tall, Tuesday reached high above her head, and has long red hair. It depends. She might be wearing a beautiful velvet coat and knee-high boots, or she might just be wearing jeans and a black top. Either way, though, she's likely to have a pencil behind her ear. Have you seen her? Did you say Serendipity? Vivienne asked. Yes, said Tuesday, holding her breath. I think I might... Vivienne started looking and looked embarrassed, and then she stopped and eyed Tuesday warily. No, it's not possible. The person I'm thinking of, well, even if her name was Serendipity, she couldn't possibly be your mother. Why not? Just not, you know, said Vivienne in an evasive way. And then shrugging, she said, I'm very cold. Are you? Tuesday was desperate to see what else Vivienne knew, but she was also bitterly cold. She would have liked a cup of hot chocolate and some toast with marmalade. Let's go and make some toast and maybe a hot chocolate, suggested Vivienne, as if she had read Tuesday's mind. Okay, said Tuesday, rather in awe, but aren't you going to put Vivacious back in her bottle? Vivienne, who had already begun scrambling up the cliff, turned and looked out to sea, scanning the horizon. Not just yet, she said. We might need to make a quick getaway. Mothwood's men will still be on the lookout for me, I imagine. Come on, doggo, she added to Baxter, who followed her up the narrow path that was well hidden by boulders and small bushes. Doggo, remarked Tuesday to the girl ahead. That's funny. That's what I call him. But Vivienne didn't appear to hear her. Sometime later, beside Vivienne's campfire, Tuesday sat wiping her bowl clean with a chunk of bread. Her cheeks glowed in the heat, and she lifted her head from time to time to watch the smoke disappear up through a hole in the roof of the cave. Tuesday's backpack and clothes were hung on the line to dry beside Vivienne's breeches and shirt. Baxter lay at the mouth of the cave, surveying the coming night. His fur was dry again, and his wings were folded at his side, the injured one carefully doctored with a special ointment that Vivienne had provided. His stomach was filled with the food that Vivienne had given him from a pot by the campfire. All three were entirely full, having consumed a wonderful backward meal that began with hot chocolate and marmalade toast and ended with potatoes in their jackets and a delicious, fragrant stew. The cave above the sea was fitted out with a small bed, a chair, a table, one shelf of cooking equipment, and another of small treasures. As the girls had prepared the food, Vivienne had explained the significance of each item on the shelf of treasures, including several beautiful shells, 2 long black spirals of dried seaweed, a compass, and a large brass ship's bell that Tuesday knew Vivienne had once stolen from the silverfish. She let Vivienne recount the story, enjoying it anew. Though she had read the story plenty of times in the pages of Vivienne Small and the River of Rithwick, It was very special to hear the tale told by Vivienne herself. Both Tuesday and Vivienne were wrapped in blankets. The fire had been roused to a merry, crackling blaze. The breeze had settled, as breezes often do at nightfall, and the sea below them was as dark and smooth and shiny as the skin of an aubergine. "Tell me where you're from," said Vivienne as she put her own plate aside and watched the fire between them. "Well," said Tuesday, "it's sort of like here, but different. What sort of adventures do you have?" "No real ones," Tuesday confessed. "This is the biggest adventure I've ever had." "Today?" asked Vivienne. "Yes, actually," said Tuesday. It seemed remarkable to Tuesday that she had only arrived this morning. "Then what happens to you on the other days?" Vivienne asked. "I go to school," said Tuesday. "School?" "Yes, you know, where you learn to read and write and do maths." "Maths?" Vivienne said, as if she was trying out the word for the first time. "Yes," said Tuesday, "and Baxter meets me after school every day, and he pulls me along on my roller shoes, which are these shoes with wheels in the heels so that you can roll along the ground." Vivienne's eyes widened. "They sound excellent," she said. "They are," Tuesday agreed. She stretched her bare feet nearer the fire. "What's your house like? Is it a tree house?" Vivienne asked. "No," said Tuesday, sounding a little disappointed. "Just an ordinary house. It's tall and narrow, with 5 stories." "It has 5 stories?" Vivienne asked curiously. "Yes," said Tuesday. "We've lived there since I was born. I've never lived anywhere else." "Who else do you live with?" "I don't have any brothers or sisters," said Tuesday, "so I just live with my mum and dad." Having said this, Tuesday sat bolt upright. Meeting Vivienne had been so remarkable and wonderful that Tuesday had almost entirely forgotten what she was here for. Outside it was well after nightfall, and she still had no idea of how she was ever going to find Serendipity or be back for breakfast. "What's the matter?" Vivienne asked, also sitting upright and listening keenly. Baxter stirred and looked back at them both. "It's my mother," said Tuesday. "I was having such a lovely time that I forgot for a little while about finding her." "Oh, yes," said Vivienne, "your mother. What's her name again?" "Serendipity." "Serendipity," Vivienne repeated quietly. "Is that her real name?" "Well, she was christened Sarah, and some people call her that, but out of the 2 names, I'd say Serendipity is who she really is." "And you thought if I could help you to find her," mused Vivienne. "Yes," said Tuesday. Vivienne looked deeply thoughtful for a moment. "Tuesday," she said at last, "have you ever known anyone who wasn't exactly real? Someone maybe only you could see?" "Oh, yes," said Tuesday. "I had a friend like that. Her name was Luella Bella. I used to drive Mum and Dad mad by making them set her a place at the table and do up her seatbelt in the car and tuck her in and kiss her goodnight. She even had a toothbrush of her own for a while." "An imaginary friend," Vivienne said. "Yes," said Tuesday. "Well, I seem to remember someone called Serendipity," said Vivienne. "Someone who might be a kind of imaginary friend. To me, you know. She's been here," Vivienne said carefully, as if she was saying something private. "Do you know where she is now?" Tuesday asked. "No, she comes when she comes and she goes when she goes." "When was the last time you think you saw her?" Tuesday asked. "I can't remember," said Vivienne. "It might have been yesterday or ages ago. It's like a dream that seems vivid while you're having it, but that you can hardly remember once you wake up." "Well, if she's not here with you, then the only idea I have is that I think she's somewhere near the end," Tuesday said. "Would you be able to take me there, do you think?" "The end?" said Vivienne. She looked puzzled. "I'd be happy to help you, but I've never heard of it." "Are you sure?" said Tuesday. "I would have thought you'd know everywhere there is to know here." "Well, I usually do, but I don't know the end. What does it look like?" "I'm not sure," said Tuesday simply, "but whatever it looks like, I think Mothwood might be there too. In fact, I thought Mothwood must have captured my mother." "Mothwood," said Vivienne Small. "Mothwood's at the end, all right. He's stone cold dead." "Mothwood? Dead?" Tuesday gasped. Really? But how? Oh, let's just say he had a little fall, Vivienne said, her eyes twinkling, off the cliffs of Cartavia. That's why his men destroyed my home. It was their revenge. Because you killed Mothwood? You mean to say that you really, finally, absolutely killed Mothwood? Tuesday felt overawed at this news. She supposed it made sense that Vivienne Small would kill Castor Mothwood at the end of a book called Vivienne Small and the Final Battle. But to hear it from Vivienne Small herself was remarkable. Aren't you pleased? Vivienne asked. She didn't seem the least bit surprised that Tuesday knew who Mothwood was. Yes, said Tuesday. I mean, it's fantastic, but somehow it's also a little strange. The two girls paused, and on either side of the fire, each gave an identical shrug and a sigh. Yes, they agreed in unison. In their hearts, they both knew that even though Mothwood had been a terrible villain, life wouldn't be the same without him. Mothwood would know where the end is, said Vivienne, her face lighting up. He has the best maps in the world. Yes, said Tuesday, frowning, but he's dead. So he won't be needing his maps anymore. We could go and get them, continued Vivienne, from the silverfish. Now? Asked Tuesday, slightly alarmed. We'll sleep for a few hours first, Vivienne said. It's best to tackle adventure when you're well rested. Vivienne made up an extra bed beside the fire, piling rough blankets on the sandy floor of the cave. Then she took her own mattress and blankets from her small bed and put them on the other side of the fire. You have the mattress, said Vivienne. Oh, I couldn't, said Tuesday. I insist, said Vivienne courteously. You're my guest. Well, thank you, said Tuesday, who knew that the best thing to do when people were very generous was to accept their offerings graciously. Tuesday lay down on the mattress and arranged her blankets, and as soon as she had done so, Baxter came to the side of her bed and put up a paw by way of asking permission to climb in with her. Do you mind if he sleeps here? Tuesday asked Vivienne. Not a bit, Vivienne said, as she curled up in her own bed. Tuesday closed her eyes, thought for a moment, and then opened them again. Vivienne, said Tuesday, you haven't said anything about your mother and father. Not a word. Tuesday knew there was no mention of Vivienne's family anywhere in any of the first 4 Vivienne Small books. She had often asked her mother, but Serendipity just shrugged and said it wasn't part of the story. Oh, I never had any parents, said Vivienne carelessly. But of course you did, said Tuesday. How else did you get born? I came out of an egg, said Vivienne. No, you didn't. You couldn't have, Tuesday said, laughing. I did, said Vivienne. It's true. But then you wouldn't have a belly button, said Tuesday thoughtfully. A what? Vivienne asked. Tuesday threw back her blankets and showed Vivienne her belly button. Vivienne gaped. I don't have one of those, she said, pulling down her own blankets. And sure enough, she didn't. Where everyone else has a belly button, Vivienne Small's belly was as smooth as, well, an egg. Ha! Imagine that! But you must have had a mother to lay the egg, Tuesday contemplated. Don't you think? I mean, how else was there an egg? Vivienne shrugged. Maybe there was a mother, but I don't think so somehow. I think I was just an egg. You could have been dropped from the sky by something, Tuesday suggested, and landed on something soft. I suppose that's possible, said Vivienne, but I'm here, and that's all that matters. Tuesday snuggled back down under her covers and smiled. She knew some things that no other reader of the Vivienne Small books knew. Vivienne Small had come out of an egg. She had no belly button, and she had an imaginary friend called Serendipity. Tell me more about where you live, Vivienne said, yawning. Tuesday told Vivienne about the people who lived in her street and the teacher she'd had this year at school and the kids she played with and what she liked to do on the weekend. She told her about trying to learn the piano, about her fear that she'd need braces when she got older, and she even told Vivienne how she still slept with a small blue bear called Toby, who had been her friend since she was very small. Just as Vivienne's life had been so fascinating to Tuesday when she had read about it in the books Serendipity had written, Tuesday's life was very interesting to Vivienne. Gradually, both girls began to drowse. Tuesday was exhausted in a way that you can only be when you've spent an entire day out of doors and some of it in the sea. "I don't think I can keep my eyes open a minute longer," said Tuesday. "Me either," said Vivienne. "Good night, Vivienne Small," said Tuesday. "Good night, Tuesday McGillicuddy," said Vivienne. With Baxter beside her, she fell into a sleep that was deep and dreamless. Outside, the moon passed across the sky, night birds came and went from their nests in the cliff face, and the orange light of the fire sent leaping shapes across the cave walls. And that, my dear ones, is the end of chapter 13. So I will see you back for chapter 14. Oh, I might give you a writing exercise because it's a good time to do it. So, as you know, we just had a big sailing adventure with Tuesday. And one of the reasons that we were able to write about sailing and sailing boats and what it's like to sail a little boat, a little dinghy, and what happens when you get too much breeze and you try to tack and then you bottle when the boat goes right over, is because I was a sailor when I was young. I sailed and sailed and sailed. I sailed a boat called a Mirror with red sails, and I sailed with my best friend Nick. So we sailed that dinghy from when I was about 10 to when, or maybe a little bit older, maybe 12, until I was 18. And we sailed every Saturday and many Sundays. We did endless championships, lots and lots and lots and lots of sailing. And that's why I can write with that degree of knowledge. And there's sure to be something that you're learning about. And there are things that you already know. You might know things about the area that you live in. You might know things about the house you live in. You might know things about what your parents do. You might know things about the animals that you have. You might know things about, a skill that you've learned. You might know how to play an instrument. You might know how to play sport. You might be able to draw or paint. All sorts of things that we learn along the way are what makes a writer's imagination rich, because you can write with authenticity. You really know what you're talking about. So as you're learning these things in life, remember that this is part of the writer's life, to learn about many, many things, because you really need to begin your writing with things you know about. So I'd like you to have a little think about what you know about. And you might like to ask questions or do some research to learn more about that. And then I'd like you to try and write down what you know. Tell us about what it's like to learn to play the piano. Tell us what it's like to dig in your garden. Tell us about what your garden looks like. Tell us about the walks that you take, or what it's like at your school. Tell us about what it's like to be in isolation, because we're all having that experience, but your experience is your very own experience and no one else is having your experience. So I'd love you to write down what you know about and see what happens and see if a story emerges. I'll see you for chapter 14.